This is a story about how the World Bank is doing everything right, except for the money part. It's a story about climate change funds and a missing $41 billion. And seeing as the UK is one of the main contributors to the World Bank, I thought you, the public, may just be interested in this story, because very little has been said about it in the mainstream media. Now you, as a rational member of the public, may want to save money. You may want to store up money in your piggy bank. And when you bank that money, the last thing you expect is the bank to not know where the money went. That it's just gone, they said. We can't account for it. And that is the nature of this story. But we have to begin with understanding what the World Bank is. Well, the story has to begin with the United Nations. They are meant to look after political stability for the world. A bit of a laugh, I know, but that's what they're meant to do. But economic stability is split into two parts. One is the World Bank and the other is the International Monetary Fund. Now, the International Money Fund is there to rescue countries that muck it up. And the World Bank is there to lend to countries to develop their economies. And the UK was one of the founding members of the World Bank and the IMF. Where does the money come from to finance the World Bank? Well, the biggest contributor right from the beginning and still is the USA, of course. We are a significant contributor in the UK, but they can also issue bonds to the general public, if you like, to institutions, and bonds that give interest, etc. So there's three sources of income, basically. The different countries, China's now a big contributor, Japan is, and so on. So these countries contribute to a fund, and that's how it's financed. Now, the assistance that the World Bank gives is generally long-term, and is funded by member country contributions and by issuing bonds, as I've just explained. World Bank staff are often specialists on specific issues such as climate or sectors such as education. And it's this climate sector we'll be looking at now. And a $41 billion sum unaccounted for. And that is the main focus of this video. That $41 billion is about 40% of the entire funds paid out by the World Bank in the last 7 years. You'd think a bank could get this right, but not this one. And not to keep you waiting, according to Carbon Brief, combined with government-reported public and private finance mobilised by the UK funds, the UK's total climate finance contribution to this reached $26.49 billion by 2023. And of course, it's going hell for leather now with Miliband. Good way to spend your money, isn't it? Well, so there we are. Over £28 billion of our money over time has gone in to the World Bank to give away on climate projects. Yes? Now, this is an organisation that can't account for up to $41 billion worth of climate funding to third world countries. Can't account for it. It can't keep track of how much money was given, who was given to, and what it was given for. That's a pretty basic thing, isn't it? A pretty basic thing, you know, but this doesn't stop virtue signalling by our government, because don't forget, it's not their money, it's yours. So the virtue signal extends to this. And let's take an example from the last Conservative government. So this is a great example of virtue signalling with other people's money, of course. And this is in the previous government, not the current Labour government. It makes no difference. The Labour government's even worse. Press release. Really proud of this. UK to boast World Bank funding to help tackle global challenges. Minister Mitchell announces £100 million hybrid capital contribution. Now, I better explain that. The hybrid ones are what you throw in like a tip on top of your normal contributions. This is like a voluntary thing. Right. To help tackle urgent development issues, as he is due to attend the World Bank Spring meetings, so he can go to the World Bank Spring meeting, have everyone tap him on the back, oh, thanks for the $100 million, because on their rules, believe it or not, they can now lend 10 times that. So with $100 million, they can actually lend 1,000 million, which is $1 billion. So the tremendous gearing of 10 to 1 with the World Bank. And this is what we're supposed to put up with, is it? This is our priorities as a country, but this is typical of when it's green, it just ploughs ahead. So who found out the money was missing? Well, on October the 17th, 2024 report published by the British NGO conglomerate Oxfam found the World Bank lost trace of between $24 and $41 billion in climate finances due to record-keeping malpractice. This is a quote from that report. There is no clear public record showing where this money went or how it was used, which makes any assessment of its impacts impossible. It also remains unclear whether these funds were even spent on climate-related initiatives intended to help the low and middle-income countries protect people from the impacts of the climate crisis and invest in clean energy. I simply have to intervene at that point. There is no climate crisis, and investing in clean energy, that means renewables, which means basically wind and solar, is really not right for developing countries, because those things can only exist a part of the time, and they need backup and storage. Storage is impossible because of costs, but you need still the backup. They're better off developing coal, gas and oil. They are better off developing fossil fuels. As you know, the CO2 is just a myth anyway, and places like Africa are actually recording record crops, as is Asia, South America, everywhere in the world. We're getting record crops because of the extra CO2. And in fact, recent research shows that the CO2 has an even bigger influence on those record crops than we thought. Now, do not forget that the UN themselves, the IPCC committee, say that mankind so far, we've found no influence on mankind in droughts, in floods, in forest fires, in rising sea levels, and so on. The only thing they claim is extra heat, and that's mainly towards the poles, not in the equatorial regions. However, they prefer just to ignore the IPCC scientists and what they say and plough on with their own political agenda. So by ignoring their own IPCC scientists, they can make claims like this. The surge in extreme weather events, which there isn't, by the way, a direct outcome of climate change, which is not true, has intensified conflicts in already fragile territories. So this is an example of that sort of nonsense claim. Water scarcity exacerbated by climate change often leads to conflicts over access to vital resource. Take the Middle East, for example, as if we haven't heard of water shortages there. A region facing significant water stress as global temperatures rise. Disputes over water rights have intensified. Tensions between communities and nations. That's a comment, 2nd of February 2024. They are basically pretending there's never been disputes on water in the Middle East. Here is the truth. We have to go back a long way. And so well before the nonsense of net zero, in fact, 2400 BC, the Langash-Umma dispute, the ancient Sumerian city-states of Langash and Umma fought a century-long war over irrigation water. Well, that wasn't caused by man-made climate change, was it? And this is how they fabricate these things. As soon as you look into anything, it just evaporates. And so to continue, note it says that conflict is leading to the displacement of 80 million people. Not that it's led to it. Oh no, it's leading to it. Predictions from the World Bank estimate that by 2050, as many as 143 million people could find themselves uprooted due to climate-induced reasons. Looking further into the future, by 2070, a significant portion, close to 20% of the Earth's surface, might become inhospitable. This is from a banking organisation that cannot even trace the money it's giving away. And so to drive home the ridiculousness of this World Bank organisation, let me take one more example, a little more detail on this to expose just how they invent the problem that doesn't exist so they can give money away that they can't keep track of. So the World Bank are saying things like this. The Sahel region, that's the edges, if you like, of the Sahara, the southern Sahara Desert, is one of the clearest examples of how climate change can interact negatively with other megatrends. For instance, in the Sahel, there is a massive population increase taking place where we expect to see almost a doubling of the population in the next 20 to 30 years. At the same time, the World Bank is reporting that productivity of the land in the Sahel has dropped by another 30 to 40%. Wow, that sounds terrible. Let's look at those claims. Well, in practice, deserts like the Sahara are reducing in size, quite the opposite of what you're being told. Look at this article here. Desertification was supposed to be the greatest environmental challenge of our time, and the UN were going on about, look how bad it is, I've just told you. Why are experts now worried about greening? That's right. They're worried about the loss of ecology of the desert, about the reducing desert. Let's look into that. Over the past half-century, most drylands have been experiencing a decline in rainfall, along with higher temperatures and greater rates of evaporation. That's the claim. Many have also been degraded by poor farming practices and overgrazing of livestock. Fair enough. Climate scientists and ecologists alike have until recently presumed that this combination of growing meteorological aridity and pressure from human activities would lead to less vegetation. And by the way, they have routinely warned of widespread desertification, which UN officials have called the greatest environmental challenge of our time. And this greatest environmental disaster of all time is down to growing meteorological aridity. So let us take a quick look at that. IPCC AR7, Table 12.2, page 1856. This is from the scientists, not the politicians. Here we have the table in question, and you can see here that column heading is where there's evidence that something has already emerged in historical record about mankind influencing it. That's what it's about. So if that box is white, it means nothing has emerged yet. So let's just see what's emerged for aridity. And there we are. The answer is nothing. So the scientists in the IPCC are saying there's no detection of mankind's influence on aridity, full stop. But of course, this doesn't stop the World Bank turning into climate scientists and increasing the alarmism with their turn down the temperature report here, and I'm quoting, increase in extreme heat and aridity, risk of forest fires, degradation of biodiversity, etc. This alarmism is just repeated by our politicians, by prime ministers, by leaders, by every sort of quango, and it even contradicts its own scientists in the IPCC, and not just on aridity, but on forest fires, on rising sea levels, you name it. The only part it doesn't disagree with is the rising heat, and even that has 100 different answers, depending upon what model they choose to cherry pick. Anyway, now back to the report. So looking at this greatest environmental challenge of our time, let's carry on reading. Yet in most drylands, this anticipated desertification has not happened. Rather than shriveling and dying, vegetation is usually growing faster and expanding its terrain, while deserts are retreating. This, researchers of the world carbon and water cycles say, is largely due to the extra CO2 in the atmosphere. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants grow by absorbing CO2 through the stomata in their leaves and converting it into plant matter. That process requires water, which in arid regions is often a limiting factor for the plant growth. Higher concentrations of CO2 in the air allow easier photosynthesis and enable plants to use less water in the process, and that's key. They don't need as many little holes called stomata to breathe in the CO2. They reduce that, and it reduces the evaporation loss, the transpiration loss from the plant. And recent research has discovered that plants absorb 31% more CO2 than we originally thought. I'll read this out. The revelation that plants grow 31% more CO2 than previously estimated is a major blow to the models driving global climate policy. It challenges the core assumptions behind policies like net zero, which were never proven to be beneficial but only assumed to be so. If the climate sensitivity is lower, warming slower, and natural CO2 absorption higher, then the rush towards extreme measures looks increasingly unjustifiable. It seems today that we have enshrined in law in the UK, into our Supreme Court even, into our quangos, everywhere, into the grid, national grid, into how the grid is managed. We have enshrined in it the whole net zero madness and the whole climate change alarmism. So now a judge has to assume the science is right and then pass judgment on that. Judges, they really do not know what they're talking about scientifically, and it is so wrong to have these laws enshrined in the very backbone of our institutions. What is very clear is that these people need a basic lesson that they must have missed at school. Most children were taught what I'm going to show you at school, so I'm actually dedicating a minute or two to educate these climate alarmists as to a basic process, photosynthesis.
The help of sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. Did you know that plants breathe just like us? You didn't? Well, now you do. Plants have tiny openings called the stomata.
And I would add that because with more CO2 it needs less stomata openings, it loses less water, and hence all the deserts of the world are slowly being encroached upon because the vegetation needs less water and so it encroaches on the desert.
Present in their leaves, through which they take in carbon dioxide. Yes, they breathe in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. They also use water and other nutrients to make food which is absorbed by their roots.
And so, dear climate alarmist, here's an example of vegetation growing where it hasn't grown before in Hustin National Park in Mongolia. Even though it was late summer and normally a very dry season, the dunes were literally green. Our host said the dunes didn't have a vegetation 4 years ago. And that's typical, and the reason I've just explained. But it was taught to me when I was at school, and I'm 79 now. Well, I'm going to end this video now with a quote from that Oxfam report. There is no clear public record showing where the money went or how it was used, which makes any assessment of its impact impossible. It also remains unclear whether these funds were even spent on climate-related initiatives intended to help low and middle-income countries protect people from the impacts of climate crisis and invest in clean energy. I mean, it really couldn't get worse, could it? And yet the mainstream media don't cover this. We're in a world where our parliament, say in the UK, doesn't listen to science. People like Andrew Bridgen have stood there to quote some science to them about the COVID vaccines, for example. And the result is they all walk out. They don't want to listen. It's even worse, I would argue, with climate change. They're just completely following the mantra, and that's it. I've sat in the green room with ex-foreign ministers and so on who have no understanding of it. And when you even try to talk about it, it's a blank wall. They're not interested. They have their doctrine, they have their agenda, and that's it. And worse still, the mainstream media have not covered this at all. This is not being branded everywhere. So what should we do about it? What's the future? Well, the World Bank is not fit for purpose. It's as simple as that. It should be closed, or at least we shouldn't contribute another penny of our money to it. And frankly, there should be lots of suckings going on and a lot of insight. No, it's going to be covered up instead, I fear. It's going to sort of just disappear. It doesn't matter where all this money goes. The Ed Miliband's of this world rule, end of subject. And that's the world we're in, it seems. It's got to change. Thank you for watching.